Today I want to talk about Kosovo and our stories of liberation. But before I do that, I think it's fair for me to spend a few minutes talking about myself and how I think the story of Kosovo has changed for me. And I'll start with something that's actually a bit embarrassing, but probably true. This time, 2 years ago, I would have been the kind of person that most people would have called a shatsi. And a shatsi is a term that Kosovars use for Albanians who live abroad. And the stereotype of Albanians who live abroad are they are the people who are getting into those arguments on online internet forums. They are the people who are flooding Pristina every summer holiday. And they are also the people who think that anything and everything Albanian is intrinsically better. And I was one of those people. Before coming back, I took great pride in the narrative of Kosovo. And for me, that narrative involved people who are actually resistors, people who said no to a power that was much greater than them. And in my eyes, we were the bravest, the kindest, and the best of people. After having been back here for 2 years, Kosovo's headlines have been filled with the regular stories of corrupt politicians, but also stories that are a bit more sinister. Stories of police brutality that we never thought would be self-inflicted. Stories of violent homophobia. Stories of crushing poverty. Stories of war victims who have yet to be adequately supported by us. In the past 2 years that I've been back, I've been lucky enough to find work that I love as the managing online editor of Kosovo 2.0. And after 2 years, I think I can say that our public life, in great part, is dominated by men. And our political life, in particular, is dominated by men who claim ownership of the story of Kosovo's liberation and the story of the Kosovo War. And the story that we hear the most about in terms of how we were liberated involves the fighting men of the KLA and the NATO intervention in 1999. Referring to that story and one's place within that story, this is how political clout is won here. And a perfect example of that is the figure of Commander Adem Yashari, who the people in this room know was a KLA commander who died alongside most of his family while fighting with Serbian security forces. Arguments over what Adem Yashari would have thought if he were alive, or what Adem Yashari would have done if he were alive, or which political party he would have been a member of if he were alive. These are arguments that carry weight here, and the memory of Adem Yashari is a kind of patriotic currency that we use. And it's a kind of currency that we use to either dictate or to moralize. Meanwhile, across Kosovo, across the countryside of Kosovo, we can find many, many memorials of fallen KLA soldiers that have been built and paid for by their family members. The roughly 1,000 people that still remain missing from the war, they are commemorated by their family members who place the photos of their missing loved ones on the gates of government buildings in Pristina to remind the government of the obligation that they have to find out the fates of their missing loved ones. Those photos were removed with the reasoning that they would be replaced with a monument worthy of their remembrance. And that monument that they chose to build was an LED screen that up until recently I thought was for weather predictions. Needless to say, this past 8th of March, the mothers of the missing marched back to those same gates and replaced the photos that were taken down. The women who were a part of Kosovo's liberation, they will be honored with a public monument, and it's titled Heroines. And the monument will be comprised of 20,000 individual medals. And the 20,000 individual medals represent the 20,000 women who are estimated to have been raped during the war. And in one gesture, everything that women did before, during, or after the war is reduced to being a victim. Maybe we've forgotten, or maybe we're just too tired to remember that our freedom was the result of the work of ordinary people. Our stories of freedom actually include stories of teachers who taught without pay, doctors and nurses who treated patients voluntarily. Our stories involve students who protested knowing that they might get beaten or arrested. They involve people who let out their own homes so that they could be used as schools. And these are the stories that I think define us. The stories of the dead, the stories of the missing, the stories of the living. They're all a crucial part of who we are. Our freedom was not the result of a few shining heroes. It came from all of us. Last year, I was lucky enough to win a fellowship for investigative journalism, and I initially applied with the idea to write exclusively about the women of the Kosovo Liberation Army. And I ended up writing a story that was about much more than soldiers. I ended up writing a story that was about teachers, doctors, nurses, community workers, activists, political prisoners, all different sorts of people who, in their own way, played a part in making life more normal for the rest of us. Their stories made me much more careful of when and how to use the word hero. And I think that the more we use a word, the less weight it carries. But regardless, I'd like to spend the rest of my time with you talking about people who are heroes and who are as brave as they are completely unknown. I would like to talk about a woman named Marta Prekpaljaj. It's not a very flattering picture of me, but Marta Prekpaljaj is a teacher in the region of Has, here in Kosovo, and she's a community organizer in the truest sense of the word. This is a woman who built clinics and libraries and schools and even got roads built in her community during the parallel system of the 1990s. And though she may not look like one, she's also a war hero. During the massacre at the village of Kruša e Vogël, Marta was there. She was on the other side of the Drini River, and she saw a Serbian raid on the other side. What she saw was all of the men being rounded up and led away to be killed. The women and the children were also kicked out of their homes and brought to the riverbank. They had Serbian security forces behind them and the river in front of them, and it could not be passed on foot. Marta got on a tractor and drove across it over the river with the help of her uncle and her brother, and they slowly started transporting all those women and children back to the other side. Approximately 400 people were saved that day. And not only were they saved, they were sheltered, and they were led to safety, thanks to Marta. Marta still lives in the region of Has, and she's still a teacher. And this is also a place where 19 bodies of the victims of that massacre have recently been returned for a proper burial. The next people that I'd like to talk about are Iliriana Hasai and Hidayeta Krasniqi. Hidayeta is the one closest to us. Iliriana is the one seated further away from us. Iliriana is a doctor, and Hidayeta is a nurse. And both of them worked in the parallel health system during the 1990s for free. And then they joined the Kosovo Liberation Army as medical personnel. And being medical personnel in the KLA meant healing wounded soldiers in makeshift clinics and on the battlefield. It meant conducting operations in private homes that people had let out to be used as surgery rooms. And it also meant serving as local doctors in the communities that they were living in. Idiriana told me a story of a day when a Serbian advance came to where their clinic was located. And her commander came to her and gave her a selection of guns. And he said to her, "There's nothing that I can do to protect you. Choose a weapon, and if it comes to the worst, use it." Nobody used any of those guns. They did not leave their patients behind. Hidayeta told me stories of leading wounded patients through rough terrain, through fields, through mountains, on hot days, on cold nights, sleeping on the ground or sleeping in a stall when they could find them, until they reached safe haven, until they were out of reach of Serbian security forces. They would not leave their patients to die. And they say that it's the least that they could do. And both of them work at the hospital in Peja right now. And I had the pleasure of spending a very nice afternoon having lunch with them. And the stories of Marta and Idiriana and Hidayeta, these are stories that we don't have them in our history books. You'll never read a story like this in any history books that we write and that we publish. And I think it's a shame, because we need to recognize that our history is written with the lives of ordinary people who did what they could when they can. The stories of Marta and Idiriana and Hidayeta, they're the stories of our family members. They're the stories of our relatives, of neighbors, of friends, of people that we know. And we need their stories. If we want to reclaim Kosovo's independence, to be more about just corruption and political backwardness, we need to reclaim these stories. This, I think, is what civic pride means. This, I think, is what remembrance means. And maybe to describe it in more concrete terms, remembrance for me would mean a memorial for all the victims of the past war. It would mean a museum documenting the struggle of people who did what they could to make life a bit more dignified for the rest of us. For me, remembrance would mean history books that are about people's stories, and not about dates and not about heroes. For me, it would mean writing more stories about people who did and continue to do good work quietly. So how have my feelings changed about Kosovo and the story of Kosovo? Well, I've changed my mind about 100 times. But talking to these people has made me believe again in who we are. If nothing else, it's showed me what we are capable of and what we can do again if we just remember. And that makes me proud. Thank you.